modeling and simulation and all that is really clustered right now in Central Florida Research Park next to UCF. UCF's a tremendous driver. It takes a great engineering program to do that. And the modeling and simulation industry started out being very dependent on the military, because if you think about it, you were modeling and simulating flights and combat and all this stuff. It expands now to almost everything, and it'll have a huge presence in Creative Village. It now is involved in, if you think about, UCF uses it to train nurses, and you simulate doing procedures and everything before you actually mess up on a human. So, but they're going to simulate everything, and we're talking about virtual schools are going to do this, and education also. It's a neat thing that we will figure out. I can't remember who pointed this out. It wasn't me. It might have been something you and I were talking about. But how you reinvent the talent that works in NASA and the Space Coast, how you redeploy that talent, that engineering talent, that technical talent, has a lot to do with the simulation cluster and what we do in Creative Village. And so Orlando is uniquely positioned in the sense that we have something for that group of folks to do. It involves a little bit of retraining and whatnot, but it's not like we have to go invent an industry that you can sort of use that in, and it's a way that we can once again reorganize the way things are done. So that's kind of an interesting opportunity. Let's talk about Paramore. The mayor ran 10 years ago. And you said it, not me. But, so tell everybody what you said.
Judge me on what I'm able to do in Paramore.
Judge me on what I'm able to do in Paramore. That's what we said 10 years ago. And so we've done some things in Paramore, and we're not finished. But this is the challenge, right? So some of these things are easy when you run for office. I give the mayor credit for saying that, because that's not an easy thing to say. It's easy to say, hey, we might go try to build a stadium or something. That's a physical goal that you can just try to figure out how to do. So talk about what's your assessment of how things have gone in Paramore and sort of where they need to go. Because neither of us would say that we're finished.
No, we're far from finished, but we have made great headway in the last 10 years. And a lot of people don't recognize that we actually think about and plan things before we do them. We don't just launch right into them. And Scott Maxwell will get on us about spending money on planning, but it's actually important to have a plan and a vision before you try to execute it. And kind of know where you're trying to get to before you take that path. So when we did the downtown, we had a downtown strategic team. And by the way, we had probably 30 things to check in that report, and I'd say we've done 28 of them,
yeah,
I would guess. But we also had a Paramore task force to look at exactly what we need to do in Paramore, and we've created pathways for Paramore, which had a number of different components, from public safety to education to economic development. And one of the most important things was feeling safe. So which comes first, the redevelopment or the public safety aspect of it? And we recognized that it wasn't Paramore residents that were committing crime. It was people coming from other parts of Central Florida that were coming there for prostitution and for drugs. So we created a zero tolerance zone in Paramore. And then probably the most important thing outside of some of the physical things that we were doing is we created the Paramore Kids Zone. And it was modeled, once again, we borrowed somebody else's good idea. It was modeled after the Harlem Children's Zone. And it's a very hands-on organization with touching every child in Paramore, which is about 1,300 at this point. And I can report to you that we also work with UCF to have measurable results in what we're doing. Is it actually working? And juvenile crime over the course of 5 years was down 80%. And I was at an event with some of the kids there, and they said, Mayor, there's no more gangs in Paramore. And there used to be, if you lived north of Church Street, you couldn't venture south of Church Street, and vice versa, because there were two rival gangs and you didn't set foot on either side. The gangs are gone, and virtually every student there, every child is in some program with PKZ. So FCAT scores are up, teenage pregnancies are down, just about every indicator you can think of is positive. And if you think about it, okay, we see our homicides on TV. When is the last time you heard about a homicide in Paramore? There's been one double homicide there at that old Haitian Oaks apartments that we subsequently acquired and took down as a problem. But in, I think, maybe the last 7 years, that's the only homicide event at Paramore. And, right? Thinking.
Paramore is statistically safer than every white subdivision in suburban Orlando. But nobody knows that. But if you run the crime stats, it's more dangerous to live in Waterford Lakes based on robberies and murders than it is to live in Paramore. That's a statistical fact, but you couldn't get most people to believe that.
Was anybody in my state of the downtown that we did in the movie theater?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you recall that we taped that at Universal Studios to show at the movie theater. Well, one of the things I said in that speech, which was edited out about 30 minutes before the presentation, was we haven't had a homicide in Paramore in over 3 years. So that double homicide
that day?
That night, the night before
that time.
And unfortunately, we have the technical ability
Yeah, right.
to take that out. So I can very clearly remember when the last homicide in Paramore was.
So what is important about to understand about Creative Village, I think, is the background of. I think a lot of people are curious how we ended up deciding to dedicate essentially the rest of our life to that. Tim Baker and Brooke Myers and I will be working on that for the next 15 or 20 years. So it takes you through the end of your professional career. It's a legacy project, and you do it for Orlando. And I think that I had to wrap my mind around that, because that's a long time. Maybe reminding me how old I am, and reminding me that I'm going to be working on that the rest of my life. So the thing is, if you do real estate development, it's good, it's fun. Sometimes it's profitable, sometimes it's not. And you do that for, some people do that for different reasons, but you don't go do Creative Village for real estate development's sake. You do it to change Orlando. You do it to leave a place better than you found it. And you actually don't do that through the real estate exercise. The buildings and everything there will end up just sort of being the mechanism. But you do it through education and transportation and some things that really give access to a neighborhood that has basically been cut off. I-4 cut off the west side. So a place that has had no access and has not had access to education and whatnot in a way that everybody else has had. So this is the way you change the trajectory of the neighborhood. It's very hard. You can't build enough HUD housing and whatnot. You just can't get out in front of that model to try to keep building your way out of a neighborhood that's bad. Now, you can help it, and there's some examples around the country where it's worked a little bit, but really education and to some extent transportation, because it just gives access to, something like Sunrail gives Paramore access to a job line that's 61 miles long, where you can now work without a car. You can now get to work in a tremendously more efficient way to millions of more employment opportunities. So it's about that, and then education is about, you can be born in Paramore and now go to a great charter school that outperforms the average as an A school. And eventually you can go to, we'll have a public school, you can go there, you can go to University of Central Florida, you can go to Valencia, you can go to UCF, you can go to a tech academy that's a VOTech type school. Like the best education in the state of Florida, never leave your neighborhood. And you'll have a technology advantage. You partner with a Google or an AT&T or somebody, and you have the world's greatest internet in Creative Village that extends into Paramore that nobody else in the region has. So now all of a sudden you live in a neighborhood that has better technology than College Park, better access to transit than College Park, better educational opportunities than College Park. You think what you think is the greatest neighborhood, and Paramore's going to outperform it on a lot of measurable things. That's the big idea of Creative Village. So,
why would you say that?
We're the College Park guys. But this is the idea, that you change sort of trajectory by doing that. So this is the spiel that we gave the mayor. So when we went in with a business plan, sure we have to have a business plan that works, right? So we weren't allowed to go in with a half-cocked thing that sort of didn't pencil, or at least Rebecca wouldn't let us have a plan that the city CFO made us have a plan that worked. But it really was this idea. All we did was, I say all we did a lot, but we took the mayor's intuitive understanding of when you tear down the old Amway, you got 60-something acres of real estate that you can redevelop. You don't have to displace one person. There's nobody that lives in the boundaries of Creative Village that's being forced to move out by redevelopment. You redevelop it and you have an opportunity to do something. I don't think the mayor or the city knew what that thing was, but there was this idea, and it certainly, you know, it was a village, and you kind of had some real general parameters around it, but we really put a business structure to it, and then we really believe in what we just said, that you can raise the bar, and you can. And the last piece of good news I'll tell you is that we've learned this really since I think you started. We didn't know the value of diversity when we started. We didn't know what I call the Brooklyn effect. So the Brooklyn effect is that if you ask this generation where they want to live, it's Brooklyn. They want to live in, they value diversity more. They'll pay more to live in a real urban diverse place than they will to live in a boring homogeneous suburban place. And so that was not the fact of the real estate market when we started. It was a little bit like I could build a few lofts and maybe get a niche market to come here, but it wasn't the overarching theme of the young generation. So the Brooklyn effect is that people want to live, and actually will pay more to live in a place like Creative Village that is truly diverse than they will pay to be in Baldwin Park. And that is a fundamental market shift that's great for us. We get to respond to that and build a place that's going to work from a real estate model because we kind of now understand that intuitively. But this is good news for everybody, because it used to be you had to really worry about, like, how do you fix certain things, or we were trying to make downtown perfect, too clean, and all that. You don't have to do that anymore. Actually, people value the grit and the diversity of it.
We're keeping downtown clean.
So, yeah, you still have to be clean and safe, but not too clean. And you don't have to be perfect. You have to try, and you have to make progress, but you do not have to. We literally used to think we had to make, like, Church Street Station, when you reinvented it, had to be like Universal City Walk or something, or you thought Orange Avenue had to be like Park Avenue or something. And it doesn't have to be that. It's really, to our advantage, that it's not that. And we can be, somebody says you can't be everything to all people. That's not true. Great cities and great downtowns are everything to all people, and they have a place for everyone. There's no such thing as a suburb that does that, but the downtown can do that. And I think you can build a city that can do that. So that's what we think about. I think that folks that aren't aware that we have these type of discussions when we're talking about creative. We go to brief the mayor every couple months in Creative Village. This is what we talk about. We have to talk about the deal side too a little bit, but that's the boring stuff. I mean, the actual working through the numbers is the boring stuff. This kind of stuff is exciting, and having these kind of conversations is exciting. So.
And you know, UCF had a role in the work of all this too.
Absolutely.
EA recognized at some point that they needed a flow of talent to, if they were going to grow their business, and came to UCF and then partnered with the city about creating a graduate level program to train gamers, video programmers. And we put together something that became the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy and housed it in, does anybody know what that originally was? So the old expo center. Yeah, it was the old State Fair showground. So it's kind of cool that it's transformed with the industries here in Orlando. When we were more agrarian,
yeah,
it was a state fair, and then it was a hospitality, used for hospitality for a couple decades, I guess. And now it's transformed into a high-tech learning center.
Right.
It also has the House of News there. So once again, we had a little task force that was chaired by Ben Knoll, who was then still with EA, and Susie Allen, when she was the director of film at the EDC, and brainstormed and envisioned about what could happen on the 70 acres once the Amway Center came down, and didn't have all the pieces, but it was a skeleton.
Yeah, right. We had the idea. For sure.
Yeah, make use of the base we already had with what is now UCF School.
What we're going to do is we're going to mingle after, so we don't do Q&A. We chop off the conversation at 9 o'clock. So it drives me crazy when you go to these events and they run long. So, but we didn't talk about a lot of things today. So you need to